Welcome to the Business Spotlight. My name's James Burke, but today we've got Phil with us, and this story is incredible. And it's not just your standard story where we've got a business owner that's going to tell us all about the successes. Phil's going to tell us about some of the big challenges that he's faced as well. He grew his company from startup to 110 staff, had some massive customers like Boohoo and Amazon, and how COVID caused a whole bunch of challenges and caused a pivot in the road as well. But I don't want to share too much of Phil's story because that's what he's here to do. Phil, welcome to the Business Spotlight.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have you with us. So I've teased the audience a little bit there, Phil. We're going straight over to you. Tell us about the history of your business and about the trials and tribulations that you guys went through.
Yeah, well, I started this business when I was 21, and say it grew. We started with screen printing of t-shirts, then we moved to embroidery, relabeling of garments, and it sort of branched out and expanded. And we supplied licensed products, workwear, and promotional. So that's how it all sort of started.
And when was that? When did you first get into business?
It was the 8th of the 8th, 88, which I didn't realize on the day. It was very people waited in China and Hong Kong to open companies up on that day because it meant money, but that was nonsense.
So
Yeah.
tell us about the journey then, how you grew into having 110 staff, what worked, what helped you get there, and then obviously, getting some pretty big customers before we hit COVID.
Yeah, well, it sort of grew. Well, when I started off, I didn't know anything about screen printing, and I had a friend of mine who asked him to do a bit of printing, found out he didn't print himself, needed a printer. So I said to him, I'll set a printer up, you give me some work. And that is how it started. The world was my oyster and I took the wrong turn.
Oh, wow.
So that's how it all started. I was employed 2 people who could print, and off we went, and we started printing, and it started from there, and it sort of grew slowly, and it's had huge amounts of ups and downs over the time. With obviously over the time there's been screen printing manually, digital printing now, print to order. There's been a huge amount of different things happened over the time. Well, 35 years I've been doing it, and it looks like I have, by my look, it looks like I have been doing it for 35 years.
So tell us, what do you attribute some of your growth to?
Well, what the most important thing to me has always been customer service, and what you say is what you do. So if you promise you're going to get it done for that day, you get it done for that day. And I always talk about one of the stories, how ridiculous we were to do with customer service. There's a company in Northern Ireland who wanted a thing. We were late with getting the stock in to have it printed. So I actually flew, I think it was EasyJet, to Northern Ireland to go and drop him off that night.
Wow.
Yeah, and he didn't even thank me after that. He said, cheers. And off he went back in his car. I was like at the airport.
Oh, wow.
So that is what I call customer service. To go that extent to not let down somebody for an order. And that's how we kind of built it up.
So,
And we did some unusual things that got us into the big boys. And networking is another thing as well. Be nice to people, and it comes back. They remember. As you're growing as well, you can become your head can become big, and you think you're better than everybody else. You got to stay humble. On the back of that, people remember that you've been there for them. So when you're in trouble, they're there for you as well, which is important. And on the back of that is why I got some great customers. We'll take Amazon, for instance. Amazon 2014, when I went to Amazon, it was working out of a little office. It wasn't the big office where we left it. And Fruit of the Loom stopped doing retail and wanted somebody to do retail for Amazon. And I had an automated bagging machine. On the back of that, they gave me the contract for Amazon, which was a nightmare, but that grew very quickly to a sort of £5 million business. It was being exported in Germany, Italy, and was growing. And to the point before COVID, it was that good. It was like we were actually talking about exporting it back to America, where Fruit Loom comes from. It's like sending sand to the Arabs. So yeah, and that was because people at Fruit Loom knew us, and that's how that side grew.
Wow. So the two big things that I've heard you say there, Phil, are number one is the real customer service, kind of going the extra mile. And number two is staying humble and treating people around you well on the way up, especially when things are going well. And then it's basically it's going to pay dividends if things turn around and they're not quite as good as they once were. Interesting. So what would you say have been the biggest challenges then? What have been the biggest challenges that you faced in business?
Well, I think I think as anyone who employs people, employing people is one of the hardest things, you know, to motivate them to pick the right people. And I'm the worst at picking people, you know.
Mm.
You give me 999,000 great people and one idiot. I used to pick the one idiot most of the time. So picking people's hard. We've had, but the worst time we've ever had is with COVID has been. I wouldn't have thought it would have been. And I'll quickly tell you what happened over COVID. We were obviously expanding huge. Boohoo was going. Another one we were supplying was Boohoo. During lockdown, it was mad. People were ordering online. It was growing phenomenally on the back of that. We then had the problem of trying to bring the staff in because of COVID restrictions, how they're working. That was a nightmare. So production dropped on there. We then had the same problem with Amazon, was growing phenomenally on there. So everything looked great on the back of that. We were thinking the world's our oyster. Then what comes is Brexit. So I forgot when that was now, but January, Brexit started. And our exports across Europe stopped. No one knew how to export. Everyone was scratching their heads. Whoever they signed, God knows, that was £2 million of the business gone straight off. Then came the Boohoo problems of, you know, people not being paid correctly and all that sort of stuff. So Boohoo had enough of that with Leicester problems. Said no more manufacturing in the UK. That was again £5 million of business gone overnight.
Oh.
Then came Amazon. As we know, inflation's gone everywhere. Price increases. Amazon said, no more work. We're not taking price increases. And that disappeared. So within 6 to 8 months, £10 million worth of business disappeared from nothing that we had done wrong. Our customer service was great. Our prices were great of what we could do to manufacture it. And within that, £10 million worth of business disappeared on the back of that. You know, and we thought, you know, you should never have, and let me say what you should never do in business. And I shouldn't have done it. Maximum you should have per customer is 20% of your business.
Mm-hmm.
We had it spread probably about 40% Amazon, 40% Boohoo. Amazon spread across 5 brands. Boohoo supplying a couple of brands for them. We thought we had enough, and another load of other fast fashion brands as well. We thought we had enough spread to do it, and it did. And on the back of that, it brought the business down on its thing with it all. So, so the mission is pick the stuff that has good margin, and don't go for turnover and that promised land that never exists. Small is beautiful, and small businesses, profit is the key to any business. You can fancy have your 10, 20 million pound turnover. It's the man who has the biggest profit is the wise one in business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've heard some really key lessons there, Phil. The first two that you mentioned early doors around going the extra mile for the customers and making sure the customer service is spot on. And secondly, being humble. And the third big thing that I'm hearing there is make sure your margin and, you know, a condition of survival in business is being in profit.
Yeah, and put money in the bank ready for those rainy days,
Yeah,
because hope is what everybody has
Right.
in business, and hope doesn't pay the bills
Very true.
with it all.
So Phil, if we could leave our viewers with one final tip, one final piece of advice, what would your final piece of advice be for the people tuning in and watching?
Well, one, definitely stay humble, and the other, and one of the most important things is enjoy your life. Is one of the most important things, and don't work yourself. Have a work balance is very important. I would work. Lunches for wimps, 7 days a week, working till 1 at night. Don't do that. The trick is to make profit, work and family and pleasure balance. That's the key to it. And friends, a handful of key friends that are always by you as well is important.
What a way to wrap up. Phil, in 10 seconds, if our viewers want to get in touch with you, if they've got any more questions or they want to find out more about the business, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Well, they can look on the website, www.creativeapparel.co.uk, or Phil Miller at Creative Apparel on LinkedIn. Both very good. And also, I'm very important to me is eco and stuff grown, looking after the planet with clothing is very important to me as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Phil, thank you so much for taking the time to share your learnings about running a business with our viewers.
Yeah, well, how not to run a business. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Phil.